Hello everybody, today I am looking at a car that I have been wanting to drive on the channel for an awfully long time. We are looking at a second generation Ford Focus ST. Now, few cars represent a point in time and a particular slice of society better than this car. You simply could not attend a car park meet anywhere in Britain in the last decade and a half without someone turning up with one of these and for a good 10 or 15 minutes solidly demonstrating their lovely pops and bangs map or their anti-lag or whatever they wanted to call it. I always thought it was something of a shame that the Focus ST and its bigger brother the RS gained a reputation as being a bit of a hooligan wagon, but then I suppose they join a very long line of famous fast Fords which are perhaps best known not for good reasons. The ingredients that went into making this car were all pretty solid. You had a 2.5 litre Volvo-derived 5-cylinder engine with a nice turbo strapped to it. You had front-wheel drive, although in some variants, can't remember if in the ST or not, Ford had something they called the Revo Knuckle, which was designed to counteract torque steer. As you may expect, this car isn't exactly standard. The base car is a 2006 Focus ST3. It has a Stage 4 Hypertune, and no, that doesn't mean anything to me either. The engine's internals have been uprated to RS specification, with modifications made to the block, although I don't know what. The turbo is also from the RS, the injectors have been uprated, and it has the obligatory AirTech intercooler. The exhaust is the amusingly named Mongoose Section 59, connected to a 3-inch downpipe. There's an M-Factor limited slip diff up front, a Volvo S60R clutch, and BC Racing coilovers. Cosmetically, there have been a raft of upgrades, giving it more of an RS look. So, there we have it. I hope you've remembered all of that, because I certainly can't. And what is the Ford actually like to drive? Well, the first thing I must confess is that getting behind the wheel of this car does bring back some very painful memories. Because you see, I got my driving licence at the tail end of 2006, and I learned with the AA. Glenn was my instructor's name. Really nice guy, ex-RAF, a brilliant way to learn how to drive. And the AA at the time had a fleet of these. Not STs, of course, they just had the regular, I'm pretty sure, 1.6 litre petrol. So many of my most painful, most embarrassing driving memories will be behind the wheel of a Focus. A decade and a half later on, and my opinion has changed in some areas, but not in others. For example, all of the pedals are a little bit too light for my liking. It's also relatively easy to stall, and I'm not sure if that's despite or because of the uprated clutch. Throttle pedal in particular is really quite slack, and you do need to bury your foot all the way to get it to do anything. However, the engine here is quite responsive even from low down. I haven't asked from it much yet, but it's actually pretty decent and nice and easy to use in everyday driving. It's making exactly the kind of noises you'd expect from this type of car, and its owner does plan to try and tone it down just a little bit. I'm with him on that one. However, there are a few things that this car gets absolutely right, and they're typical Ford highlights. The steering is actually pretty pleasant even at low speeds, and these Recaro leather seats are absolutely wonderful. They're heated, they're comfy, they're nicely supportive. They're exactly what you want in a fast hatch seat. In fact, the car actually, as a general runabout, is pretty good. Loads of space in the boot, decent room in the back. The styling of it's actually pretty good as well, I think, and it would make a fantastic all-rounder. That's probably one of the reasons that these were so popular. And if you're thinking of buying one now, apparently anywhere from about £3,500 onwards will get you into an early, if not perfect, ST. It isn't lacking for firepower, that's for sure. I haven't even put my foot all the way down yet, but it pulls hard. That's probably because this engine in current trim produces just shy of 400 horsepower, dyno proven, and even scarier, something like 560 odd newton meters of torque. To put it into more relevant terms, that's more than the Audi R8 V10 that's currently sat on my driveway. That's a lot of pulling power, it really is. itself is entirely unadorned of, well, anything. The stereo controls are operated by what I can only describe as the spade from a bucket and sandcastle kit off the beach. It's a little bit rubbish looking and reminds me of more than a few old Transits. Despite the presence of BC Racing coilovers, a brand often associated with less than perfectly built cars, it actually rides pretty well. It's a little bit lumpy, it's a little bit jittery, but actually it's much more comfortable than you might think, given the noises that this car makes. It was purchased to be a somewhat fun but also practical daily driver, and it fits that brief really well. However, the making or unmaking of any hot hatch is and has always been a British B-road. So let's get it onto one of those and see what she's like. The caveat, of course, today being that it is pretty chilly. I know it looks nice and bright and sunny. The car believes it's about 7 degrees, but this morning when I came out of the house, it was about no degrees, and the entire driveway was frozen up. Right now, on this road, the ST is useless. Completely and totally useless. I can't blame the car too much, because I know many a hot hatch that would really be struggling right about now. But this is one of the issues with turbocharged and particularly tuned turbocharged engines. It starts to spin up, and then once it really comes on song, all it wants to do is just spin the front wheels. Despite the presence of a limited slip diff, it's still a very wayward car. It will go left, right, centre, up, down, side to side, whichever way it wants really. It's less so much focus and more maybe a wonkavator. The previous owner has also put a very unusual combination of tyres on it. The front has Nankang NS2Rs, not exactly revered for their all-season ability, and the rear is Michelin Primacies. So you've got the stickiest rubber you can find and the least sticky on the same car. I'm reminded of the old advert where they tell you that cross-plies and radials don't mix. If you haven't seen that one, search it on YouTube and thank me later. It's not a very natural thing to pilot, and it will just yank you into the centre of the road as and when it likes. Somewhat disconcerting, and that does ultimately hamper your ability to really cross ground. I feel like on a day such as this, a completely standard car would probably be quicker, because you're going to be fighting it that much less. That being said though, there's still plenty to find to like about the car. The gear shift, actually really quite pleasant. The steering isn't brilliant, but it maintains a consistent weighting, it tells you what the car is doing, and it's pretty sharp too. I actually rather like it. The engine also does have plenty of pull from low down, so what you can do is just short shift and ride that pretty hefty surge of low down torque to maintain your speed. It's at higher speed where you can see that the suspension is still perhaps a little unresolved, BC coilovers being not exactly a premium item, but it's far from an issue. It's not harsh or punishing or anything like that. You just need to be aware that it's not as well damped as some other cars. The pops and bangs do become somewhat tiring. I'm told that this car has been averaging probably about 21 miles to the gallon across a range of different uses. I suspect that's probably about 20 miles worth of fuel to actually get the car moving and 1 mile's worth of fuel to make the silly noises. With traction control on, you'll feel the car reining in the power quite frequently. With it off, it'll just try and eat those front tyres and then push you into the hedge with even more speed. This is not the sort of car that you can drive easily or half awake. it will kill you. You can see exactly how and why it became popular with the crowd that it eventually did. But it's actually quite a shame, because I can see how this would actually make a really nice, well-refined, daily drivable car for not a lot of money. You buy one of these as standard, do a little bit of tuning to it, put on a sensible exhaust, and I think this would be a really great car to enjoy. Unfortunately, you may find that insurance costs aren't quite as cheap as you'd hope because of its reputation, but it should be fairly cheap to maintain thanks to its ubiquity and therefore the availability of parts that comes with it. I would really like to try an RS of this generation, and actually also the earlier Mk2 too, because I've never had the pleasure. This car actually, much like its Escort Cosworth ancestor, I think is far better, more usable than people probably give it credit for. It's just a shame that many choose to turn it into something a little bit like this, and even this car, in absolute honesty, isn't that far off being quite usable and enjoyable. I'd rein in the power a little bit, put sensible matching tyres on it, sensible exhaust, and then you've got something that's actually really an excellent all-rounder. Heel and toe not really quite so easy in here, just because of the way that the pedals are set up. It's a bit of a shame really, because the box is so nice to use. Brakes are reasonably good, but in conditions like this, honestly, it's the tyres that I'll really be testing, not the brakes. For all its faults, though, I will say that I have certainly driven far worse tuner cars. This one doesn't actually seem anywhere near as hodgepodge or thrown together as it may appear. It's actually reasonably refined. Not a car for me, but if you are looking for something a little bit interesting, a little bit different, which actually has a cool bit of history and now is somewhat rare, because I don't know about you, but I do not see these anywhere near as much as I did even, say, 2 or 3 years ago, it's a decent option. Very Essex, but very good. So there we have it. That is the Mk2 Ford Focus ST. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you all for the next one. Bye-bye.